Aaliyah Thompson had never seen a school like this before. It was big, bigger than her old one in Chicago, and everything about it felt different. The way people talked, the way they dressed, even the way they looked at her. She kept her head up, though. She wasn't scared, just cautious. Her parents had moved here for a fresh start, a better job for her dad and a quieter life for the whole family. But for Aaliyah, it didn't feel quiet. It felt loud, strange, and lonely. She walked into the school on her first day with her backpack slung over one shoulder, her hair neatly pulled back into a high ponytail, and her uniform pressed just right. Her mom always said, "First impressions matter," so she made sure to look put together, even if inside she felt nervous. She found her homeroom easily enough and took a seat near the window, where she could watch the other students come in laughing and chatting like they'd known each other forever. She tried not to stare, but it was hard not to notice how everyone seemed to fit in except for her. Most of the kids were white, and while there were a few other black students, none of them sat near her or said hello. She told herself it was normal. New schools were always awkward at first. She would make friends soon enough, but that didn't happen. Instead, the days passed and Aaliyah remained the girl who sat alone at lunch, the one who got ignored when group projects were assigned, the one whose name was mispronounced on purpose by some of the teachers. She didn't talk much, not because she had nothing to say, but because she didn't want to draw attention to herself. She figured if she stayed quiet, maybe people would stop looking at her like she didn't belong. Still, she couldn't avoid being noticed entirely. One afternoon, during gym class, she changed into her uniform quietly, while the other girls whispered and giggled around her. As she walked out onto the court, a voice called out from behind her, "Where'd you get that shirt, Walmart again?" She turned around slowly and saw Emily and her group of friends standing there smirking. Emily was tall, with long blonde hair and a smile that looked friendly until you realized it never reached her eyes. She was popular, the kind of girl everyone wanted to be around, even if they were afraid of her. Aaliyah didn't answer. She just kept walking. The next time it happened was in the hallway. Someone brushed past her and muttered, "Stuck up." Another time, someone else asked, "Do you even live in a real house?" It wasn't always direct. Sometimes it was just stares or fake coughs that sounded suspiciously like her name followed by something rude. And then there was the social media stuff. Mean comments on pictures she posted, fake accounts pretending to be her saying stupid things. Still, Aaliyah didn't fight back. She didn't cry. She didn't lash out. She just kept going to school. Every day, doing her work, getting good grades and trying to stay invisible. But being invisible doesn't always keep you safe. One morning, as she walked down the hallway with her books in hand, someone bumped into her shoulder hard, on purpose. Her books went flying and she stumbled forward. A few kids nearby laughed, and she recognized Emily's laugh among them. She picked up her books slowly, ignoring the sting in her eyes. She wouldn't let them see her cry. Not now. Not ever. Later that day, she sat outside during lunch under a tree, eating quietly and reading a book. She liked reading. It gave her a place to escape to when the real world felt too heavy. But even there, she wasn't left alone. Emily and her friends came over, sitting a little too close, talking loudly about how some people think they're better than everyone else, and how you can take a girl out of the city, but you can't take the city out of the girl. Aaliyah closed her book and stood up. She didn't say anything. She just walked away. Inside, she was angry, frustrated, tired. But she knew that reacting the way they expected her to, getting mad, yelling, crying, would only give them what they wanted. So instead, she made a silent promise to herself. She wouldn't let them win. That night, she sat at her desk and opened a notebook. On the first page, she wrote, "They think I'm weak because I don't fight back. They think I don't hear them, but I do. And one day, they'll realize they messed with the wrong girl." She started writing more after that. Poems, thoughts, stories about what it felt like to be treated differently just for being who she was. Writing became her strength, her secret weapon. At school, She still kept her head down most of the time. But she also started speaking up more in class, raising her hand when others stayed quiet. Teachers began to notice her, not just for her brains, but for her calm confidence. Some of the quieter students started sitting near her at lunch. Not many, but a few. Emily noticed too, and she didn't like it. So the bullying got worse. Someone wrote something mean on her locker. Her chair mysteriously disappeared one day in history class, and once someone poured water on her seat before she arrived, but Aaliyah kept her cool. Every time they tried to break her, she held herself a little taller. Every time they laughed, she smiled a little wider. She wasn't afraid of them anymore. What she didn't know was that her moment was coming. A moment where she wouldn't have to hide her strength anymore. A moment where she would show everyone, including Emily, that silence isn't weakness, and that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. The teasing had always been there. Small things like looks, whispers, or fake coughs that sounded like an insult. But now, it started to get worse. Aaliyah could feel it. The way Emily and her friends looked at her wasn't just mean anymore. It was angry, like they were trying to prove something. One morning, as Aaliyah walked into school with her backpack on one shoulder, she heard a voice behind her say, "Oh look, the quiet queen is here." She didn't turn around. She knew who it was. It was Emily again, laughing with her friends like she'd said something funny. But Aaliyah kept walking. She had made up her mind long ago. She wouldn't give them the reaction they wanted. Still, it hurt, it always did, she just refused to show it. Then came gym class. It was one of those days when everyone was tired and no one really wanted to play volleyball. Aaliyah stood quietly near the net, waiting for the game to start. She wasn't great at sports, but she tried her best. That's when Emily walked, past her and suddenly shoved her from behind. Aaliyah stumbled forward and almost fell, catching herself just in time. The girls around them laughed. Emily gave a fake smile and said, "Oops, sorry, didn't see you there." Aaliyah turned slowly and looked her in the eye. Her heart was pounding, but she didn't let it show. She simply said, "It's okay," and walked away. Some of the other students watched in silence. Some looked down at their shoes. No one said anything. No one helped. Just like always. After that, the bullying got even more serious. It wasn't just words or small pushes anymore. One day, Aaliyah opened her locker and found someone had stuffed it full of crumpled paper and trash. Another time, someone drew something ugly on her desk and wrote her name under it. She cleaned it without saying a word. At lunch, someone spilled juice on her chair while she was getting food. When she sat down, she felt the cold wetness right away. The table nearby burst into laughter. Emily smirked and high-fived one of her friends. Aaliyah stood up slowly, wiped off her pants, and walked out of the cafeteria. She didn't cry. Not then. Not ever. Later that night, she sat at her desk and opened her notebook. Her hands were shaking a little as she began to write. "They think they can break me by making me feel alone. They think if I don't fight back, I'm scared. But I'm not scared, I'm just waiting. One day they'll see that I'm not weak. I'm strong. And I won't stay quiet forever." She kept writing until her eyes got heavy and her hand hurt from holding the pen so tight. Still, the pressure didn't stop. In math class the next week, the teacher called on Aaliyah to answer a question. She raised her hand quickly and gave the correct answer. The teacher smiled and said, "Good job, Aaliyah." Emily rolled her eyes and whispered loud enough for others to hear, "Show off." Aaliyah didn't react. She just focused on the board and ignored the heat rising in her chest. But the worst happened during a group project in history. The teacher split the class into groups of 4. Aaliyah was placed in a group with Emily and 2 other girls who usually followed Emily like shadows, Soon as the teacher walked away, Emily said, "We're doing this without her." She pointed at Aaliyah like she wasn't even there. The 2 other girls nodded nervously. One of them looked at Aaliyah with pity but said nothing. Aaliyah didn't argue. She just picked up her books and moved to another desk. The teacher didn't notice. Or maybe she did and chose not to do anything. That night, Aaliyah cried. Not because of what Emily had done, but because no one had stood up for her. Not once. Not ever. But crying didn't last long. After wiping her tears, she went back to her notebook. This time she started writing something different, something powerful. She wrote about strength, about silence being louder than yelling, about how sometimes the strongest people are the ones who choose not to fight back. Not because they can't, but because they know they're better than that. Days passed, and the bullying didn't stop, but Aliyah changed. She still didn't fight, but she held her head higher. She spoke up more in class. She made eye contact with people. She smiled at strangers, and slowly, some of the other students began to notice. A few kids started sitting near her at lunch. One boy named Marcus even asked her to help him study for a test. A girl named Rachel, who used to laugh with Emily, now just watched silently when the teasing happened. Emily saw the change too, and she didn't like it, so she decided to go even further. One afternoon after gym class, Aliyah walked out of the locker room and found her backpack missing. She searched everywhere. Her locker, the benches, even the hallway outside. Nothing. Finally, she saw it hanging from a tree outside. Someone had thrown it up there like it was a joke. Her books had fallen out and landed in the dirt. Her phone was gone. She stared at it for a long time. Then slowly she walked over and began picking everything up. A few minutes later she heard footsteps. Emily and her friends were standing nearby, watching. "Well," Emily said. "Gonna cry now?" Aliyah looked up. For the first time, she didn't look away. "No," she said calmly. "I'm going to keep going. Like always." Emily frowned, confused by the lack of fear. Aliyah stood up, slung her broken backpack over her shoulder and walked away. Inside, she was boiling. She wanted to scream, to yell, to tell them how much it hurt. But she stayed strong, because she knew something they didn't. This couldn't last forever. And one day the moment would come. The moment where she would finally stand up, not in anger but in power. And when that moment arrived, they would regret every cruel thing they'd ever done to her. Until then, she would wait. But she wouldn't break. It was a Friday afternoon, and the school gym was buzzing with energy. The annual talent show had finally arrived. Students filled the bleachers, teachers sat in the front row, and a small stage stood at the far end of the room. Colorful lights hung above, casting bright shadows across the floor. Aliyah hadn't planned on performing. She had never thought of herself as someone who belonged on a stage. But her notebook, the one where she wrote all her thoughts and poems, had become more than just a secret place to escape. It had become her voice. And now that voice was ready to be heard. She had signed up last minute, almost surprising herself. When the teacher asked if she was sure, Aliyah simply nodded and said, "Yes." Her heart pounded the whole time, but she didn't back out. As the show began, students performed magic tricks, played instruments, and danced. Emily and her friends were among the early acts. They did a skit, a fake news broadcast about mysterious happenings at the school. At first, it seemed funny, but then came the punchline. They made fun of Aliyah. One girl pretended to be her, walking stiffly and talking in a slow, exaggerated tone. Another read off a fake report saying, "Local new girl still hasn't figured out how to blend in. Experts say it might take another century." The audience laughed nervously. Some people looked away. Others tried not to smile. But many just watched, unsure of what else to do. Aliyah sat backstage, hearing every word, her stomach twisted, her hands clenched into fists. But she stayed quiet, breathing deeply, reminding herself why she had come here. When the skit ended, Emily and her group bowed dramatically and walked off stage to loud applause. They high-fived each other, clearly proud of themselves. Then came the next act, and after that the next. Time passed slowly for Aliyah. She could feel her nerves growing stronger, louder, like a drumbeat in her chest. Finally, the announcer called her name. Aliyah Thompson. There was a pause before she stepped onto the stage. She wore no costume, no makeup, just a simple black shirt and jeans. She held a folded piece of paper in her hand, but she barely needed to look at it. She walked to the center of the stage and took the microphone. For a moment, there was silence. Then she began to speak. Her voice was calm, clear, and steady. They call me stuck-up because I don't laugh at their jokes. They call me fake because I try my best in class. They say I think I'm better than everyone, but maybe it's them who think they're better than me. The crowd grew quiet. Even Emily, sitting near the front, stopped whispering to her friends. I used to wonder why they chose me, why they thought it was okay to make fun of me. Was it because I'm black? Because I talk differently? Because I don't wear the same clothes or listen to the same music? Aaliyah paused, letting her words sink in. But I realized something. It wasn't about me at all. It was about them, about how scared they are of anyone who doesn't fit into their world. And I won't let fear win. She kept going, her voice rising with strength. I've been pushed, laughed at, ignored, and hurt. Not once did I fight back. Not with anger, not with violence. But that doesn't mean I'm weak. It means I'm strong enough to choose peace over hate. The gym was completely silent now. Even the teachers leaned forward, listening closely. Maybe you don't understand what it feels like to be different. Maybe you think it's okay to pick on someone until they break. But I'm here to tell you I didn't break. I rose. She lowered her head slightly, then lifted it again, locking eyes with Emily. So the next time you see someone who doesn't look like you, try kindness instead of cruelty. Try understanding instead of judgment. Because one day, the person you least expect will stand taller than you ever imagined. With that, Aaliyah stepped back, handed the microphone to the announcer, and walked off stage. Silence. Then slowly, someone clapped. Then another, and another. Soon, the entire gym was clapping. Some students even stood up. Aaliyah didn't look back. She didn't need to. She already knew she had done what she came to do. Behind her, Emily sat frozen, her face pale. For the first time, she looked unsure of herself, like she had seen something she couldn't control. The rest of the show went on, but no one really remembered any of the other performances. All anyone talked about afterward was Aaliyah's poem. Some students came up to her after the show, saying things like, "That was amazing," or, "You spoke for so many of us." Even a few teachers stopped by to shake her hand. Emily didn't say anything. She just watched from a distance, arms crossed, jaw tight. Later that night, Aaliyah sat at home, scrolling through her phone. A video of her performance had already been posted online. Comments poured in. "This is powerful. More people need to hear this. She's incredible." Her mom came into her room and gave her a hug without saying a word. "You did good," she whispered. Aaliyah smiled. She didn't feel like the quiet new girl anymore. She felt like someone who had finally found her voice. And she wasn't done yet. The next day at school, things were different. People looked at her differently. Some with respect, some with curiosity, some with regret. Emily avoided her. So did most of her friends. But others started to reach out. A few girls invited Aaliyah to sit with them at lunch. Marcus asked if she wanted to join the debate team. Even some of the teachers mentioned using her poem in class discussions about bullying and identity. It wasn't instant change, but it was real. And for the first time since moving to this town, Aaliyah didn't feel alone. She had turned pain into power, and she had done it not with anger, but with courage. The video of Aaliyah's performance spread quickly. At first, it was just students at school watching and sharing it with their friends. Then, people from other schools started to see it. Soon, local news stations picked it up. Some radio hosts talked about it during their shows. Even adults were moved by what she had said. Aaliyah didn't expect any of that to happen. She had only wanted to speak her truth, not become a voice for an entire community. But that's exactly what happened. One morning, as she walked into school, she noticed more people looking at her than usual. Some smiled. Others just watched quietly. A few gave small nods like they understood now. Like they finally saw her. She passed Emily in the hallway. Emily looked away fast, pretending to be busy with her phone. Her group of friends stayed quiet too. No fake coughs, no mean looks, just silence. It felt strange, like the world had changed overnight. Later that week, the school principal called Aaliyah into his office. He asked if she would be willing to speak at a youth empowerment event happening later that month. It was something the city organized every year to help young people build confidence and leadership skills. At first, Aaliyah wasn't sure. Standing on stage in front of strangers? That sounded even scarier than speaking in front of her own school. But then she thought about why she had started writing in the first place. It wasn't just to feel better. It was to make a difference. So, she said yes. Over the next few weeks, things began to change at school. Teachers started talking more openly about bullying and how it affects students. Some even used Aaliyah's poem in class discussions about respect and identity. Students who used to ignore the teasing now spoke up when they saw others being treated unfairly. One girl even told off someone who made a joke about Aaliyah behind her back. Another boy stood up for a younger student who was being pushed around. Aaliyah realized something important. Her story hadn't just changed her life. It was changing others too. Still, not everything was perfect. Emily tried to pretend like nothing had happened. She avoided Aaliyah whenever possible and kept mostly to herself. But one day after gym class, she approached Aaliyah near her locker. "Hey," Emily said, her voice quieter than usual. Aaliyah turned slowly. She didn't say anything right away. I wanted to say I'm sorry," Emily mumbled. "For everything." Aaliyah studied her face. There was no smirk this time, no sarcasm. Just honesty. She took a breath. "I know you are," Aaliyah said calmly. "But sorry isn't enough if nothing changes." Emily looked down. "I guess I never really thought about how it felt to be you," she admitted. "No, you didn't," Aaliyah replied. "But maybe now you will." And with that, she closed her locker and walked away. She didn't hate Emily, and she didn't want revenge. She just wanted people to understand, to realize that words hurt, that actions matter, and that kindness costs nothing but means everything. As the days went by, Aaliyah found herself getting more involved at school. She joined the student council. She helped start a new club focused on building respect between students of different backgrounds. She even led a workshop during lunch where anyone could come and talk about how they felt, whether they'd been bullied or had seen someone else being treated unfairly. More students showed up than she expected. Some shared their own stories. Some apologized for things they had done. Some simply listened. And every time someone spoke, Aaliyah felt stronger. Not because she had power over others, but because she had chosen to use her pain to help heal others. Even some of Emily's old friends came to the meetings. They didn't sit together anymore. They didn't follow the same crowd. They were learning, just like everyone else. By the end of the school year, Aaliyah's influence was clear. The hallways felt kinder. The classrooms felt safer. Students who once stayed silent now raised their hands to speak up when something was wrong. The school newspaper even did a story on her, calling her the girl who changed a culture. When Aaliyah read that, she smiled but shook her head. "It wasn't just me," she told the reporter. "It was all of us choosing to do better." That summer, she kept going. She spoke at the Youth Empowerment event, where hundreds of students gathered to hear her share her journey. She met kids from all over the city, some who had faced similar struggles, some who had never thought about them before. She answered questions. She hugged strangers. She signed autographs for little girls who looked up to her. Afterward, a mother came up to her and said, "My daughter wants to be just like you." Aaliyah smiled and knelt down to look the little girl in the eye. "You don't have to be like me," she said gently. "You can be even better." Back at school the next year, Aaliyah was elected vice president of the student council. She helped plan events that brought students together. She worked with teachers to create new programs about mental health and inclusion. People still looked up to her, not because she demanded attention, but because she gave them hope. And through It all she remembered where she had started. She remembered the lonely lunches, the cruel jokes, the moments she wanted to cry but held it in. She remembered being the girl no one saw. Now she was the girl everyone wanted to be like, and she wouldn't trade that for anything, because she had learned the most powerful lesson of all. You don't need to fight fire with fire. Years passed, and Aaliyah grew into someone even she wouldn't have believed possible. She wasn't just the quiet girl from Chicago anymore. She was a leader, a voice for others, a symbol of strength. By her senior year of high school, she had become student council president. It wasn't something she had planned, it just happened because people trusted her. Teachers asked for her opinion on new programs. Students came to her with problems they didn't know how to solve. And every time, she listened. She started a mentorship program that paired older students with younger ones, helping them deal with issues like bullying, loneliness, and self-confidence. The school changed because of it. Kids who used to eat lunch alone now had friends. Students who once made fun of others now helped stop the teasing when they saw it happening. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but things were better. Emily had transferred to another school after junior year. No one really knew why, and no one asked. But before she left, she sent Aaliyah a short message during finals week. "You showed me what real strength looks like. Thank you." Aaliyah read it once, smiled, and saved it without replying. Some lessons take time, and some people change when they're ready. When graduation day finally arrived, Aaliyah stood on the stage with her diploma in hand, looking out at the crowd of proud families and cheering students. Her parents beamed from the front row. Her little brother waved a handmade sign that said, "My hero." As she stepped off the stage, teachers stopped her to say goodbye and wish her luck. Some even told her they'd been inspired by her journey. One teacher said, "You changed this school, Aaliyah." She shook her head gently. "We all did," she said. College was next. She got accepted into a university known for its strong social justice program. She majored in psychology and leadership, wanting to help young people find their voices the way she once had. During college, she kept writing, not just poems, but speeches, articles, and eventually a book. It was called The Girl They Missed, and it told the story of how silence can be powerful, how pain can turn into purpose, and how sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose kindness over hate. Her book became popular. Schools invited her to speak. Teen groups shared her story online. Young girls wrote to her saying she had helped them feel brave. One letter stood out. It was from a girl named Layla, who had been bullied for years. "I used to think I was broken because I didn't fight back," Layla wrote. "But then I read your story and realized I was strong all along. Thank you for showing me that being kind doesn't mean being weak." That letter stayed with Aaliyah forever. After college, she started working as a motivational speaker and youth counselor. She traveled across the country, visiting schools and community centers, telling kids that they mattered, that their voices were important, even if no one seemed to be listening. She never forgot where she came from. Every time she spoke, she reminded students that bullies often act out of fear, that the best revenge isn't anger, it's rising above. That true power comes not from tearing others down, but from lifting them up. And she always ended her talks with the same message. If you feel invisible, keep going. If you feel unheard, keep speaking. If you feel alone, know there are others, like you, waiting to be seen too. Back in her hometown, the school put up a new mural in the hallway. It showed students of different backgrounds standing together, smiling, united. In the center was a quote from Aaliyah's poem, "Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's strength waiting to rise." Students would stop and read it on their way to class. Some took pictures, others simply smiled. Aaliyah visited once years later as a guest speaker. When she walked through the doors, students clapped. Teachers greeted her like an old friend. Even the principal gave her a hug. She walked past her old locker, remembering the days she used to sit alone outside reading books to escape. Now she saw younger students sitting there, talking, laughing, supporting each other. Change hadn't come overnight. It had taken time, courage, and the choices of many people. But it had come, and Aaliyah was proud. Later that night, she sat at her old desk in her childhood bedroom, flipping through her old notebook. The pages were worn, the ink faded in places, but the words were still clear. She opened to the first page and reread what she had written so long ago. They think I'm weak because I don't fight back. They think I don't hear them, but I do. And one day, they'll realize they messed with the wrong girl. She smiled, closed the notebook, and looked out the window. She had proven herself, not with anger, not with revenge, but with courage, and that courage had turned her pain into purpose. That was her legacy, and it would live on. For every kid who ever felt unseen, unheard, or unloved because Aaliyah Thompson had risen, and she had brought others with her.